That one fight night is still in my mind is like so epic because we had about 20 of us. It was something like UFC 65, Randy Couture was fighting Tim Sylvia. All of us were sitting there so hyped up because in the first 10 seconds, Randy does the leg kick and then the overhand right and knocks him down. Yeah. We all were off the couch screaming. We haven't really been able to replicate that experience since.
Well, we did. When you moved away, actually, we did it at my place quite a bit.
Welcome to another episode of Efficient by Design podcast. Today, I have my two co-hosts with me again. We've done a few of these together, the three of us. So I have my brother, Brad, and my good friend, Dustin. So obviously, Brad, we have known each other for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And Dustin I've known you now for, I think, 25 years.
Yeah, not quite.
Something like that.
Close.
18, something like that. So we worked together, started Akribis Construction back in the day. Brad worked with me back then as well. So we're going to go through a little bit of our relationships and our lives in regards to careers, building of our own houses, family, wives and kids, and all kinds of fun work, malarkey and shenanigans that have happened through that time. So we'll try not to regurgitate too many stories we've touched on before, hopefully none. So try to be careful with that. So why don't we start off with, our background that we've kind of laid out through the podcast so far, talked about the start of Akribis Construction, and Brad with us then. And there came a time soon after the start of that company that we built our own houses kind of for ourselves and helped each other out with that. And then yours was a few years after, 10 years after maybe. How long ago did you build your house now?
It's got to be like 5 years
Only 5 years ago,
probably something like that.
So yeah, Dustin and I, we went through that in a similar time back in
2007.
6, 7, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Right. So to start with that, how was that process for you? What was going on then at that period of time?
Well, was that before you had the mustache? Dustin walked into work this morning. It was so awesome. He walked in with this little grin on his face. And I think I noticed that stuff early. If somebody gets a haircut or something, whatever, I'm usually like, hey, you got a whatever. And right away, boom, he had a little grin.
You touched it.
Did I touch it?
Yep, that was the first thing.
Just like this little Tom Selleck pet.
Yeah.
And like it was
and
really
you
nice.
mentioned your kids said they reminded you of a Disney character and you got all excited like a Gaston or some macho dude. What'd they say?
Mr. Potato Head.
Yeah, that seems right.
Yeah, so far today, because the move to the mustache, I've never had a mustache.
Right.
My dad has always had a mustache or a goatee back and forth. He'd shave off the mustache and we'd be like, what is wrong with your face? And you can't figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I've grown at different times, grown a beard. And so this time around, I find having a mustache uncomfortable. This is the first time. And growing up, we always thought mustaches were you would never desire to have a great mustache.
No, they were wicked in the 80s and early 90s. And then for the last, 20 years, they kind of just...
I feel like mid to early 80s. I think even by the time we were around 10, around the late 80s, early 90s, it was gross.
Yeah, it was kind of gross. But you would every once in a while see someone who had a really great mustache.
Yeah.
And you go, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyways, yesterday, I decided to shave the beard, but I just did a casual, gentle, I went shorter, not as short as this with everything else and left the mustache long. I went through my day, no one noticed. And I thought, perfect. I'm just going to go for it because in some ways, having a mustache is a lesson in humility.
Sure.
You just go for it. And I'm a little bit of I care too much what people think.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, this is going to be a good little practice for me to just do something and not be worried about what people think. So I decided to go, the number one on the buzzer and leave the mustache. And I just wrapped it up. I'm like, kids, the mustache is here. And so they were watching as I came out of the bathroom. And Olivia started laughing. And she's like, you look awesome. You look like a Disney character. Yep. Mr. Potato Head. And then Christy texted our other kids and everybody kind of gave their feedback.
Yeah.
And our other daughter was like, you look like you're going to go put on a flannel and chop some wood.
Yeah.
And then I came in here and I got, so far it's been Mr. Potato Head. Then I got a Ted Lasso.
Yeah.
And right away, I'm like, those are really great
Yeah.
characters. And then just recently from Bailey.
Yeah, Bailey. What did you say, Bay?
Goose from Top Gun.
Goose, Top Gun.
Yeah.
So far, those are
And then
three-
Mark said he's never even seen Top Gun.
And then, yes.
Anyway, back to the stash.
Yeah. So it's a great little lesson. And so far, I haven't been too embarrassed or ashamed.
We'll have to work on that.
Yeah, you'll have to work on that.
See, I've had this for quite a long time, but it's not actually, I wouldn't say almost like a legit mustache because I've always had this little thing going on there. And Joe Doust, he was so good. Like I don't know, I think he inspired me to do this little thing because he's been rocking that.
Joe Doust is worth a mention. Who's Joe Doust?
Joe Doust. I mean, again,
Who isn't Joe Doust?
Yes, he's a legend. He's a legend.
So Joe Doust, for context, was a guy who framed with me for years, a phenomenal drummer. We did music together. He was the first kind of full-time employee I had in the leather shop, and he's since moved on to become full-blown electrician.
Yeah, but also a soundman. And if you were to ask Joe, he would say he is a soundman, sound technician who plays drums. He's not a drummer who also does sound. His passion is like in the sound, audio tech. And I mean, he toured around like Canada and the States with bands doing a lot of that kind of stuff. And,
He's a guest I would love to get on, and he'll never do it. There's no way.
and no offense to Joe, like it's not that at all. It's just not his personality. He's a quiet guy. You get to know him, and the guy's one of the most talented, loving, unassuming, friendly, just gem of a guy. Anyway.
But the mustache was after the house.
Sorry, back to the house.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So
Yeah,
before
that
the
was
mustache,
Before the mustache.
what happened?
Yeah. So I never wanted to build a house. I mean, I thought it was cool, but that was for like really ambitious, hardworking people. I don't necessarily see myself as ambitious or hardworking.
Well, you're not.
Yeah, exactly. So if it wasn't for my father-in-law, because back in, early 2000s when we moved to Summerland, a person could build a life here, right? We had no money when we moved here, literally no dollars in the bank, and a crappy 89 gold Honda Accord that died the day after we got here and got towed out of our driveway. We had nothing except my wife and I and our firstborn, and Christy was pregnant with the second.
Townhouses? Is that?
We were first living with some friends.
Oh, yeah.
They were away on a cruise, so we lived in their house for like 6 weeks. And then, so family helped us get a down payment for a house, our little townhouse. I didn't even know what a mortgage was at that stage. They helped us get into it. It only cost $100,000 at that time, which in Summerland is craziness. And then we started our business, and Christy, with 2 kids, she was able to stay at home. We were able to live off that. We were pretty comfortable off one income. And then it was slowly over time, my father-in-law would be like, hey, have you seen any lots around town? And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. That's stressful. And I have 2 young kids. Why would I do that? And every time he'd see me, bug me. You found a lot yet? What do you mean found a lot? Well, I'll help you. I'll help you buy a lot so you can build a house. I don't want to do that. And every time I saw him, he'd bug me about it till finally Luke started his house, bought a lot. And so because of Luke doing it, I was like, well, somebody's like literally right in front of me doing the thing. Let's go for it.
You have the skills and the resources. You're already building houses.
Yeah.
Why not?
And we had the ability because we were able to sell our house for double. And
oh, really?
We sold it ourselves, didn't have a realtor or anything. Like seriously, just put a sign on the grass. And some lady was like, I want to buy your house. And came in, made her coffee. And she said, so I'll give you, we were asking like 200,000. I'll give you 185. No, I'm going to sell it to you for 200,000, or I go with a realtor tomorrow and it jumps up to 220. You choose.
You said that.
Yep.
Jeez.
And she goes, 195. I said, seriously, I'm not trying to be rude. We're going to go with a realtor. It's going to jump up this much and it's going to go. So you can either buy it for 200 or not. And she's just like, I got to go have a smoke. So she goes out in the back, has a cigarette, comes in and she's like, my husband's going to kill me because he told me I have to get it for less than asking. And I said, I get it. But this is the price and it's fair price.
Yeah.
And it's going to go up from here. So you can rest assured that you're getting a good deal. It's going to get more expensive. Fine. And she shakes my hand and it was done. And we were able to buy the lot. And I just followed in behind you. Like, I don't know, we were only a month or 2 months really behind you in building process. So it was, we could all be over at your house, building your house, framing it up. And my lot was literally across the street. And
Yeah, what was it, 80 feet away?
Yeah.
My house.
How much was the lots?
mine was just over 80,000.
And we were the first one in the subdivision. Ours, I think, was 79.
Yeah.
Under 80, which was ridiculous. Like
Yeah.
there was nothing
There was
else
nothing else.
under 100, I don't think.
And it's a teeny little cul-de-sac with way too many lots. And we were just like, hey, this is our chance. And truly, it was an incredible opportunity.
Yep.
And I look back at it with so much gratitude because if it wasn't for people pushing me, I wouldn't have done it. And getting into it, having Luke as an example to be like, plow all the, ground in front of me to be like, hey, this is the steps I went through. And I had never drawn blueprints before. So Luke came over, gave me some, advice, and Christian and I literally just drew it out and did our own plans, drew it all ourselves. And I remember going into the building inspector, Al, and I literally just had, because Luke would tell me, you need these elevations and so on and so forth, do it like this. And you helped me with some like roof line stuff that was a little bit complicated. And I remember being like, I can just bring it in. And it was literally just pencil drawings on a big sheet of paper. And
you're an artist, though, so that helps.
Yeah. So it wasn't like chicken scratch, but was able to go in and everything got stamped.
From your drawings.
Yep.
Because that's not how it was when I did mine.
Yeah, not anymore. This is a little bit old west with the old building inspector, and there was like no homeowner builder protection stuff or certifications. It was like you could build your own home if you had plans that were to scale.
Yeah,
and it had all the information needed. You could take them in, like that's all you need. Yeah, with proper cross sections and stuff. And
I didn't know any of that stuff. Luke helped me.
So that's almost 20 years ago, and just for perspective, 80 grand for that lot. That lot now would sell for, in Summerland,
I'd want to say between 200,000 and 300,000.
Yep.
For those little tiny lots.
Probably, yeah.
But if it wasn't for Luke and his experience, I wouldn't have been able to do it. So, we'd be over at his house framing it up. And then it wasn't much longer. We were over at our house doing the footings and stuff. And then I was so pumped to be able to try and do as much as I could. And I remember being really surprised that I could rent a good size excavator and they would just drop it off.
Yeah. And the rental was literally what?
The rental center is like 2 blocks away.
Yeah.
But they dropped off this huge, in my mind, this huge excavator.
Yeah.
And I had worked on machinery before, so I was comfortable with it. But what do you mean you can let me drive this huge thing around? But I didn't I didn't prep for, the foundation, but I did the backfilling. Yeah. Because I thought this will be fun. Yeah. I want to do this myself. And it was awesome until I was near the utilities and I was just I was just like, I just had the edge of the bucket. I was like, I just want to, just a little bit of that away. Just a little scrape. And then, and I panic. I'm like, I'm going to kill everybody.
Yep.
There's gas.
Yes, gas.
And so I think I just called the number. I can't remember if it was 911 or there's like a gas emergency number. And they shut down the whole street, the whole block.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm screwed. I'm going to get
just like a tiny
fined.
yellow? Wasn't it just a small little yellow?
Not very deep.
No.
Like the
it was
home
like a
supply.
foot under the ground or something.
Really
it's
shallow.
Yeah, it's really shallow.
Yeah, and I hardly touched it.
Yeah.
And I thought I'm so screwed. Fine is going to be ginormous. It's going to screw up the whole thing. And it was maybe like $200 or something. And I was like, oh, just about killed everybody. And
it's funny how that's what it seems like when I've been around machines when they've hit like 2-inch mains and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just whistling the whole block. Like you can hear it from a few blocks away. And everyone's like, turn everything down. Don't close doors. Don't start your car. The whole thing's going to blow. And you're like, everyone's tiptoeing around and afraid you're going to blow your house up. And you call the authorities and fire truck comes charging up right to the break with their truck running, walk around like it's nothing. And then they do their thing and get it shot like, oh, so this isn't like about to explode?
Yeah, like I just picture in the movies, like I step out and a rock goes under my boot and it's like a little spark and then, and then it go flying. Yeah.
I've always been shocked because I've been around several times that this happened.
But I have heard, I've also, in all our years of working in different crews and stuff, I remember, I think we were working together and classic having a coffee and somebody's telling some crazy story. And I can't remember the guy's name, but he always had these really like violent stories and talked about a guy, he was working up in the oil patch and a guy on a machine was doing some work and hit a line, like a big one, and it incinerated the machine and him in it. Like the machine was gone.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's
so
different level.
You hear those stories and you're like, I'm a goner. I just touched it. I'm just waiting to be like bright light.
Yep.
And blow away in the wind. But yeah, working on the house was stressful. But super amazing experience for me of like having to depend on other people for help, having to work at a rate that was so difficult to maintain. Like my family at one point moved out to Alberta to just get out of the way so I could finish the house, and living in a little holiday trailer in the empty lot next door. And I wasn't working with you guys at that point. It was just all in on trying to finish my house. And I remember nights where I would just work for 24 hours, like just so that my family could come home. And working like that is terrible, but at the same time, there was something really great about it.
Sure.
And to have people come in and help, and there's people's names written behind the drywall, all the people that helped, put in the flooring and different things. There's people's names all in that house. I wish we still had it. Like even the people who live in it now, apparently they connected with Christy somehow. And they were chatting and said that our kids' names and stuff are still in that room under the stairs, and they can see the height of our kids. And that kind of stuff is pretty awesome. So I look back at that experience with a lot of gratitude because of my personality. I would have been too scared to do it. And to look back, I'm like, I can't believe I did that. But if it wasn't for Luke in the community, I don't think I could have done it.
And me, maybe.
You weren't around.
Oh yeah, right.
You say this every time.
I always do this. I just feel like he's getting all that, and Brad was.
No, you were around.
Yeah, I was.
Because you were in the.
This didn't help at all.
But all truth aside, like all truth aside.
All truth aside, just lie. Just lie.
Like I was brand new into construction still at that point too. So maybe you just didn't notice me.
No, I remember you in helping us with the footings and stuff.
Yeah.
Because Luke and I got into a little bit of a row, and you were there.
That's right.
Trying to help break it up.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you were around.
Yeah.
But I think you were leaving soon for your adventures or something.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I know. It's funny. Like I have specific memories of your house. One is meeting the Tin Bashers, which I think we mentioned.
Oh yeah.
There that were like they were playing like wicked music. And then some of them had like tattoos of like musical notes, and they were like, they'd played in bands and stuff like that. That was super fun. And as far as the building process of your house, I remember those guys in there. I remember, and again, honestly, that's a little bit of where the UFC thing came from, because once you had your house up and running, one of the things you do is you invite over, I don't know, sometimes there'd be 3, sometimes there'd be 10 or 15 guys.
That one fight night is still in my mind is like so epic. So our house had been more or less finished, not quite, but livable and everything. Just finishing was left. But I remember being so excited to have people over. And so we had that big vaulted living room. And I remember, getting our friends together, and we had the TV with the fights on, and then a secondary screen with a projector, because we had about 20 of us in there. And I remember getting so pumped because I wanted it to be fun for people who had never really been to fights before.
Yeah.
And so everybody came, I don't know if you remember this, but when everybody came in, they put their hand into a hat and pulled out a piece of paper with numbers, a series of numbers. And the numbers indicated which fighter was theirs for the night. So in each fight on the card, you got a number indicating the red or blue corner. And if your fighter won, you got a point. And then whoever had the most points at the end got a prize, which was an epic fight movie, Bloodsport. And, a DVD. Oh, and it was Bloodsport. And you remember that movie, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, Ong Bak?
Ong Bak, yeah.
Yeah, with that
Tony
wicked
Jaa.
tie.
Tony
Yeah,
Jaa.
Tony Jaa.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
What UFC was it? Do you remember what number it was?
It was something like UFC 65, and it was Randy Couture was fighting Tim Sylvia.
Oh, yeah.
And Randy had come out of retirement, and Tim Sylvia was like 6'8", monstrous destroyer of worlds.
Yeah.
And Randy was 43 at the time, came out of retirement.
He's younger than me.
Yeah, my age.
He's your age.
My age.
That's crazy.
And he
Came
comes
out of
in,
retirement.
yep, into heavyweight, which the heavyweight limit is 265, and he was like 220 something.
Yep.
And he comes in to fight this monstrous giant. And I remember all of us were sitting there and we're watching this fight, and we were so hyped up because in the first round, and I had just watched this fight recently with Matthias to show him. He's never watched UFC.
Yeah.
So I got to show you this epic fight.
Yeah.
Because in the first 10 seconds, Randy does the leg kick and then the overhand
Yes,
right,
I remember
and
that.
knocks him down.
Yeah.
And I remember when we
And then
watched
charged
that,
him.
yep,
Yeah.
we all were off
Yeah.
the couch screaming.
Yeah.
And then he just owned him the whole fight, taking him down.
Yeah.
And that experience with all the guys there was so awesome.
Yeah.
And we haven't really been able to replicate that experience since.
Well, we did when you moved away. Actually, we did it at my place.
yeah.
Quite a bit.
Nice.
But yeah, we haven't. I mean, I haven't watched it a whole lot in the last several years. So I know you've kept up with it. There's a lot of new guys that I'm like, but then you start throwing in some of the old names like Cerrone and whatever, like that guy's still around. Those are the ones that, I want to see them fight again. But it's kind of a whole new breed since Chuck
Totally.
Liddell and GSP and Tito.
Rampage.
Yep.
And then who was the nipple twister guy?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Who
it
was
He would
that?
look across the-
Rashad Evans, but then there was the other guy too.
He had the big-
Keith Jardine.
That's who it was.
That's who it
Keith
was.
Jardine.
Yeah.
He'd look across his opponent from the other thing there. He'd
Squat
just be like
down.
sitting there squeezing. Yeah,
It's so weird.
so weird.
I think Chuck Liddell was like our favorite for the Iceman there with
Yeah.
his huge overhand rights, his mohawk. It was
Yeah.
so badass.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
But it was pretty one-dimensional back then to a certain degree. I mean, not exactly, but I mean, I remember also as a fan not understanding the ground game, being like sometimes fights would be on the ground and people would just kind of lose it. Like, this is so, it was on the ground the whole time.
Yeah, boring.
But then as we understood it more and got more educated, you realize there's this amazing chess match happening and you knew what they were trying to do. And like,
So when did that change? Because we started watching it pretty early when Royce Gracie was dominating like
Well,
crazy, and then
we used to rent the VHS from
right.
Blockbuster.
Yeah.
And like I think I've watched every UFC. And back in the day we didn't even really know what it was. You know how you're bored and, well, not anymore, Blockbuster, and you're like, what should we watch? And I remember walking in through the aisle.
Just a
and
second. For those young guys out there, Blockbuster was a movie rental place. You'd go in and actually rent a VHS, a big plastic box.
and if you were really lucky, you could go to the place and they have a deal on 7 movies for $7 for 7 days.
yeah.
Oh.
And then you go in with a group of buddies, and I remember, you go by all the action movies, and you're like, yeah, whatever. And then UFC stuck out because it had some guy's face in the front, all smashed in, and it's like real fights, no rules, and you're like, oh, okay, this is gonna be cheesy, but this is gonna be a good time. And renting them, and then watching those crazy, crazy fights where there's no weight classes, no rules.
Yep.
Ruthless.
Full on
Ruthless fighting.
punching to the junk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like before that was illegal. You
Yeah.
could
The guy with the
actually-
Jesus tattoo on
Yeah.
his back.
I think you weren't allowed to
Head
bite.
kicks while you're on the ground. You couldn't
right?
bite. You couldn't eye gouge.
And you couldn't eye gouge. Other than that, for like
Yeah,
Oh,
and Hoist
man.
Gracie won UFC 1. And he was in his gi and just this legend, smaller framed guy submitting people. And
And who
everybody's
was
like,
it
what
that-
is this?
Who was it dethroned him? And everything changed.
I
The
don't-
wrestler,
Matt
Hughes?
Matt Hughes.
Matt Hughes,
Well,
I
they
read?
fought at one point way further on, but all the UFC buffs will get a kick out of this, us trying to figure out what it was. I know there was a big duel between him and Ken Shamrock.
Oh
Right.
yeah.
But yeah, I don't remember all the details of
Right.
how they work. Cause there was at one point, cause then you used to have to fight multiple fights in one night.
Mm.
And he was so depleted in a subsequent UFC, he was so depleted from his fights that his team wouldn't let him continue because he just was so exhausted and he couldn't do it. But he was willing to go.
Yeah.
And
I felt
and
like
fight.
the torch
And he
got
lost.
passed at Matt Hughes. Seems to me the case. Like that was where like
Totally.
things changed. Like, okay, here's a legit wrestler who
Yeah, because they fought,
Yeah.
and it was a big deal that Hoist came back.
Yeah.
And at that time, Matt Hughes was a big deal, just destroying
Mhm.
everybody. And you're right, it was different.
Because
was
it seemed like
wrestling.
it was called like MMA, but it was more that in the early stages it was like mixed. It wasn't so much that one person had a bunch of. They had their thing,
Yeah.
and they're
Yeah.
gonna fight against this thing. Whereas now it's like legit. This
Yes.
one guy can do all the different.
But that was part of the draw. Is you'd get some like kung fu dude
Yeah.
versus a sumo
Yeah.
wrestler,
Yeah.
and you're like, which one's better?
it was cage fighting.
Yeah.
Was how
and
it was
like when
determined,
Machida
Yeah.
came in, like Machida with like the full on. And you always remind me the way that you kind of like stand, head back.
the
and
way
you kinda
I
like,
knock people out.
I know you
Yeah.
knock people out. You just like I think Machida all the time. Like,
Yeah.
The karate, the wide karate
and, we,
stand.
and you have to. We have to pay homage just because he was the one construction guy. Who was he?
Big Guida.
Clay Guida.
yeah, the carpenter.
Because we were all framing, and whenever the carpenter would come out there, and he would always like say something in the States. I'm assuming it's a union. He
Yeah.
would often like give
Yeah.
something
Props
to
to the union.
the
Yeah.
carpenters union, and I just loved him.
His-
And he wasn't the best fighter, but he was just full of piss and vinegar, just left it all out there.
Oh,
He'd be
he's wicked.
long
completely
hair,
bloody
yeah.
all over the place, and at the end of the fight, even if he got his ass kicked, he was just like pumped ready, like he could go he
Such a good time.
yeah, so fun, like
Yeah, always a good fight.
That's awesome.
yeah.
The only one UFC that I want to talk about at all is UFC 100. Who was in that? Where do we see it? Because that was a big deal. I
I
feel like
don't really remember. I feel like that's Brock Lesnar days.
was that the beginning of Brock? I just feel like the 100 was like a big.
The big one.
we watched
there was the
together.
Rory McDonald and what was his name? The one that you want to show
yes.
Matthias.
Yes,
I can't
yes.
think of his name.
I'm drawing a total
Rory,
blank. Yeah.
Robbie
Lawler.
Lawler.
Mm.
That one. I remember that was
Oh, that's still, it's in the Hall of Fame now, that fight.
but yeah, I do remember there was some really big one that we
I thought it was 100. But
Maybe.
anyway, okay. So there's some great thoughts and memories of your place and construction. In regards to mine, the things that come to mind about my place is very similar. Like you got 4 kids, not then, had little kids, and trying to build a house while you're running a company and doing family, being a father and husband. And I know for us, like we moved into our house so early,
Mhm.
like no flooring, no doors, no railings.
Mhm.
We had paint, no trim,
Mhm.
kitchen cabinet. We didn't have kitchen. Like there was nothing.
Yeah.
And we had a bathroom sink, or the kitchen sink was the only sink we had. Like
it was like that for us because Christy was pregnant with Olivia, our third, and her water breaks. We have no like shower tub or anything. It's just one toilet, one sink.
Yeah.
And go to the hospital, come home with this new baby, and her first bath was in the kitchen sink.
Yeah.
And I remember because she had these like heart complications and she's got all these things on her and just this teeny little body in the kitchen sink and being like, same thing, your house isn't even done.
Yeah.
And you're just like, what am I doing?
Yeah. So we spent all those years with little kids trying to finish the house, and basically the tasks of the house were kind of put underway by the mobility of the child.
Yeah.
You know, like they can start
Yeah.
crawling. I better get some flooring down.
Yeah.
Oh, they're starting to stand. I better get the window liners in. So I'm putting their hand in the acoustical.
Yeah.
And like it was all these things that were then they could move around. I need to put finally build drawer fronts and doors from the kitchen on the lowers so they can't get in there and they can reach. So all these things were kind of motivated by the.
And you
development
had
of kids.
these ambitious ideas.
I did. That was like an art project in a sense for me. I had high lofty design plans, which I ended up executing, but they were super involved. And
Like all these inlay in the
Yeah.
floor and then a matching inlay in the cabinetry.
and the
And I was
stairs and the
like,
railing and all
No,
that.
white cabinets, done.
Yeah. I did all hickory cabinets with square walnut inlays in the corners and the shaker doors. It was fun.
All
the
from scratch.
Yeah. I basically bought the materials and the tools to build it for like half the price of buying a custom kitchen.
Yeah.
And then built it all myself. Yeah. The thing that comes to mind about my place, that was like the scary, terrifying moment, which any framer will sympathize with, was lifting my tall wall at the back.
Remember that.
So it was two-story.
Wasn't it just the three of us too?
Yeah.
Like we didn't get anybody else to come help,
So it wasn't very wide. Like it was a portion where it went from 2 stories. So I think there was maybe like, I want to say 8 feet of 2-story wall. And then it went down and there was a rake wall built into it for another like 8 or 10 feet over our little dining room area. And the three of us had to lift that thing. And those tall walls, it's like you get off the ground, like, oh, this feels fine. And you start walking it up. No, let's get a little heavier. Let's get a little heavier. And you get to that like, 3/4 or 2/3 spot. And you're like, you're standing there and you're just like trying not to let your back snap in half and that the wall just stalls and everyone's digging for the last little bit of strength.
Because all the weight's now
back up over your head.
Like,
And I like to think that most of the weight's on me because I'm the tallest.
right.
And then it's mostly Brad hanging from the wall as I'm pushing it up. Right. Is the usual routine.
And all the things are going through your head at that moment. Like, it's tacked down at the bottom and you're like, if those tacks pull out and the wall then like tips, we're all getting smashed.
And if it's not perfectly level in your head, you're like, okay, why is he not pulling his weight?
Oh, man.
I know it's funny how you're like, you're pushing so hard, and what's going through your mind is like, is he even doing anything? You're just like,
Yeah.
And you're imagining too, like the escape strategy. If it starts to go, it's like you got to bail.
Yep.
Like you're either trying to dive out of the side or you're trying to aim for a window that's going to Charlie Chaplin on top of you, right?
Exactly.
Like,
How many times do you plan, okay, the window's right here. If it starts to, I'm ducking into the window.
or you're going like, am I thinner than a 2x6? Like if I just go, would it?
Stud space.
Stud space, yeah. Totally.
Oh, then you're trying to break through the plywood. Oh man. Yeah. So I remember that wall that went up like, that was stupid. Let's never do that again. Well, I've been in that situation. I bet you a half dozen times since where we got lots of guys for sure. This is fine. And the same stupid thing happens, man. So yeah, that process was great, but it was a huge job. And as much as I had promised myself not to be that guy, I didn't put the last piece of baseboard in until like the day before we moved out and had sold it.
Totally. So it was the same for us. But I thought about this recently. Like when we were building our houses, there was really not a lot of the process that was done online as far as like research or anything.
Yeah, that's true.
And remember you guys had done a little membership with
Direct Buy.
Direct Buy.
Yeah.
And in Summerland, we would have to drive into Kelowna, 45-minute drive, to go and just look at a catalog of whatever, your cabinets, your countertops, whatever.
It was an hour then too, because it was still a 2-lane, windy, sketchy road.
Yeah, the bridge hadn't been redone yet.
And the highway wouldn't have been 4-laned. Yeah.
Yep.
That's a big deal.
It was a huge deal. And I remember being like, I got to go pick out lights. And you'd go, or flooring. And then you would get a call that it's been delivered and have to go get it, whatever.
Yeah.
I just was thinking about how inconvenient that was. And wow, nowadays you can do all your research. Yeah.
Sit on the can on your phone and order a full custom kitchen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we both got our houses done kind of similar time. And then, we were framing. I carried on framing. And to touch on your build as of, what'd you say?
I think about 5 years ago.
5 years ago?
Something like that.
Because you as well. Now, the requirements for building when you did yours had changed.
Yeah, quite a bit.
You needed official plans and you needed your own certification to be your own homeowner builder.
Yeah.
And you had to like go through a course and all that stuff.
I had to go through the course and study and then take this. And again, it was that whole classic stupid thing about this, like the centimeters to inches And I'm like, I'm about to build my own house with a tape measure that is all in inches and do everything in inches.
Let me give some context to that quick for our
Yeah,
non-Canadian audience. So in Canada, we are a metric country across the board.
Wish we were.
So technically speaking, on paper, we are
Yes.
metric. However, our fabulous neighbors in the basement, the Americans are imperial. They were supposed to, I can't remember the year, but there was like a year, I want to say it was like 78 or
You're just
something.
pulling it out of your ass.
I have looked it up a few times. I just can't remember. It's a while ago. They basically, all of North America was going to transition over to metric. Canada switched, and the US is like, yeah, that seems like a hassle. Nah. So then Canada's like, pardon? We switched our signs and everything. We're metric now.
Yeah.
And they're not. So we live in this stupid limbo of all building materials, because we are by far and away the smaller nation, all building materials being built in imperial dimensions, and our country being governed by metric. So we have to do a bit of both, which is a royal pain in the butt. So we're always, 2.54 is forever in my head, because that's a conversion from centimeters to inch. So I'm converting for like ordering concrete and all kinds of things. But for the most part, all of our buildings happen in imperial, but then you do schooling in metric.
So dumb.
And
Super dumb.
sometimes, do you guys give, we don't do this too much anymore now because of cell phones, but when you give people direction, like, oh, we're just 2 miles down the road, do you say miles or do you say kilometers?
I think I say kilometers. I'm
I do
pretty,
kilometers.
but you're right. It's not uncommon at all for someone to be like, it's like a mile or 2 miles.
Especially for our parents.
Yeah.
They'll say miles.
I think of like driving distance in kilometers and speed in kilometers per hour.
Yes.
But then anything smaller, like I think of in feet
Yeah.
and yards.
I can't say how tall you are in metric.
Me neither.
Yeah.
So
But
we're,
that's the same
we're,
thing
we're
when you
stuck
go
in
to
this stupid mess in the
weight.
middle.
Like if I'm watching hockey and I'm like, oh, that guy's big. I go look up his stats and it says he's like so many centimeters tall and he's
Kilograms.
67 kilograms. I'm like, what the?
Yeah.
So
I can't picture that.
and me,
Yeah.
me neither.
Yeah. So anyway, that being the reality of you going into school to do this program, and you're all like, oh, great, metric. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, but luckily passed the thing and I was able to do the house, do the homeowner builder thing, which
So
turned
talk
out,
about the design of your house a bit, because your house is unique.
Did you draw your own plans?
I did. Yeah. I drew them out on the thing, but then I had to get them converted.
Oh, okay.
Ken actually took them and made them like a legit thing.
Sweet.
So yeah, I think with mine, like, again, like it was interesting actually going into the house. And I remember having conversations with a few good friends because there's part of me that I'm so blessed that I get to build my own house. This is ridiculous that I get to build, like I've had parents and in-laws that have helped out. And, we basically got given this lot by my in-laws and I get to build this place. And I never, similar to you, like I never in a million years really wanted to, for one. And then second, never had the skills, so it wasn't until framing with you guys and learning and then being like, man, I could actually do that. But I remember like when I, traveling a little bit around the world and finding things, I was always drawn to like kind of the rustic, but modern marriage, of kind of like this kind of like brick, but then with white and maybe some black steel, kind of like this New York apartment kind of style thing. Right. And so I remember actually when my wife and I, we were in Australia, with buildings, we were actually taking pictures of different things and the way that the wood transitioned to the brick, to the white, to the drywall and stuff like that. And so I think that was just kind of stewing in my brain for a long time. And so when it actually came up that I had this opportunity, it was like the thing that I struggled with was because I'm also the type of person that like, I feel like I could live in a crappy trailer and be totally fine with it. I'm like, I could live in a tiny little place and I would make it my own and I would kind of probably make it unique as well. I would make some trailer into like the wickedest trailer you've ever been in.
Well, for context too, like I think of as kids in your room,
Right.
you couldn't see the walls. It was like basically wallpapered and posters and gizmos and gadgets and all kinds of crazy stuff. It was like a museum.
Yeah.
And your workstation in the shop is the same. It's like just all kinds of gadgets, gizmos, and
Totally.
I haven't
decorations.
seen very many pictures of me at your workstation, but a lot of pictures of Luke. You guys like smiling.
Yeah. No, if
friends.
you look actually in the garbage can, there's no, but and so I think that so if you take those kind of things, that's a little bit of the way my house is kind of turned down. And so I remember struggling though, like, is it wrong for me to make this this thing, this home, and put all this art and put the time into doing all these extra things, because obviously it costs more money. It's like how important is that? Am I doing it because I want people to come in and be like, oh wow, you have this big thing? And it was kind of this battle inside. And I remember it was talking to somebody, I can't remember, maybe if it was, might be even Justin or one of you guys or Lee or something like that, being like, Brad, you are created with this passion, with this artistic thing, and to be able to build this and to express yourself through your home and everything is a beautiful thing. So don't feel guilty that you have this desire to build something beautiful and unique and whatever. And that actually, I think, gave me almost that freedom to be like, yeah, that's a really cool way to look at it. And so that's kind of, I think, what I was able to do, to put that into the house and have it be kind of that.
And it's obvious when you go into your house that you have put that time in, not to impress anybody, not to appear a certain way, but to express yourself. And so I remember the first time I went into your house, I was like, this, like, museum is a good word, or it's a display of like artistic creativity, how you would go to the dump and unearth treasures and then turn it into something like you did with the sink in the bathroom with like an old sewing machine and the lockers and the brick on the wall, and how you were able to find like old timbers. And there's just so much story in every part of that house that it's a shame that if you ever had to sell that house someday, they're not going to have the friggin' any notion of what heart is in there. And I felt the same way about selling our house. Like, the people who buy it have no idea. And we had to rent our house for a couple of years. That's even worse, because then you have people who, all their best efforts, it deteriorates and kind of starts to fall apart. And just that feeling of like, when you build a house, you're genuinely putting your heart and soul and body, everything into this thing. And you're doing it for your family. And it's a really powerful experience, but it's also entirely depleting. And all of those huge like wrestling matches of like, there's people in the world hungry and don't have a home. And here I am stressing about, like in my case, a friggin' engineer wants me to do a rock pit here or there. And I got to put this, whatever. You're just stressing about all these little things.
Yeah. There's so much that goes into it. And I mean, and part of it too is like, I think my wife also, like, I would talk about, this is what I want to do. And then I would kind of run it past her. And then she would kind of like, she was a really good barometer, if that's the right word, of kind of keeping me on track. She basically is the one who took care of the kids, kept working, and I was able to basically stop work and just build a house. And so her influence and support was huge in that. And as I talked about in a different episode, if you guys listen, you'll also hear that I crashed on that house. Like, I full on had a burnout, mental breakdown, whatever you want to call it, counseling, medication, off work because of what I put into that house. And so in retrospect, would I do it a different way? Absolutely. Like, I would not, I don't recommend going and building a house pretty much by yourself. And, you feel good, you think you're, it was the wrong choice. And at the same time, the things that I've learned from it forced me into places that I never thought I would go into. It forced me to let a lot of the guard down, have other people come and support and love me and my family, and help finish the thing. And so now when I see it, that house is so much more than just that artistic piece, but it's this story of being loved by other people and having, I think that's something that it's also really become too. So super thankful for that, but don't do it by yourself.
There's a couple things that come to mind about your place, because you had a stupid tall wall too. And again, from all of our past running experience, because you had a 2-story wall, and was it 2x8? 2x8 wall. And
it's almost the length. Like it's
30, 40 feet.
Something like that. And we knew that. And so we invited a bunch of guys
Tons.
down.
We had an army of people. And we still barely got that bugger up in the air. It was terrible.
I know. We're like, we're not going to do what we did, with the three of us. And I think we just misjudged the weight, because there was a bunch of posts or things to hold all the steel in that one spot. So there was a lot of wood in it. So maybe we just...
that was a bugger. And the other one I remember was the process of you kind of artistically creating the house at different stages and trying to get your head around some unique ideas. And at one point you came to me like, hey, I got this idea. I want to run by you for my stairs. I'm like, okay.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
what do you think if for the stringers of the stairs, if I do them exposed and I use railway track? And I was like, railway track.
Because I found railway track. I phoned the rail company that we have a train that comes through Summerland. I phoned them and I got my way to the top, found them. I'm like, do you have any? And he was going to give them to me for free. Yeah. These 2 huge long things of railway track.
So we kind of checked around a little bit and realized that, railway track actually is like a wet noodle. It's not rigid at all. Yeah. Like it needs tons of support. So then it goes from railway track. Okay, no, that's not an option. Well, structural steel stringers, that'd be neat. That'd be cool. And then Brad's got this basically it's like a 2-story living room, kitchen area. And then he wanted to do like a balcony around that goes in and also the rooms upstairs. It's kind of this chalet kind of loft feel. Yeah. And the whole construction of your kind of catwalk area and stairs, which you weren't too sure how we were going to do it, turns into a structural steel cantilevered with like funky angles and all kinds of crazy.
Yeah.
And
I basically just gave that to you. I'm just like, this is what I want. I had to draw it. Like, this is what I want it to look like. And you have to use the brain because I do not have even the slightest ability to do that. But
so those of you who work with structural steel know how crucial it is to have perfect plans and dimensions, and then perfect communication between builder and architect and engineering. And if anything is out of line at all, the whole thing is a mess. Mm-hmm. So I remember after we talked about, okay, this is the direction I want to go. Here's how it would have to work. Here's how we cantilever things and run this beam back into here and to catch that one. Okay, we'll kind of mock it up. We'll take it to the steel fab place. Mm-hmm. They'll do up their drawings. Okay, that should be good. Now bring it to me. I'll have a quick look over it. I look at it.
These are the official plans. This is just before we're going to get the steel made.
Yeah. So then I look at it. I'm like, well, no, this isn't right. The run won't finish here. And that's the wrong number of stairs and the intersection. Okay, no, time out. We go back to his place and we're snapping on the floor, remeasuring. And it was probably like four or 5 revisions, substantial, let's get it built. Let me check one more time. Yeah. Nope, this is screwed again. It was such a huge job. But by the time it all came together and we craned it all in, it basically all fit perfect. But it was...
Yeah, that was... I remember on the day, because on the day, we were going to put the steel in place and do the trusses right after the steel was in place. So we had everything there. We're putting the steel, because everything was there previously, putting all the steel in, and then the one long, huge steel that went from that side to this house wasn't there.
Right.
And we're like, the crane's here, everyone's here, this is the day.
Yeah, we're missing a beam.
And I phoned the company. Luckily, they're only in Penticton, about a 20-minute drive. I'm like, we're missing the main thing. And they're like, what? And they went out in the back of the yard. What? Yeah, we got it here. We'll ship it right away. And so they chucked it on a big truck and drove it out. And luckily, we kept going. But that was I thought...
Well, I'll have to do an Instagram reel or stories about your house and do a quick walkthrough and show the details. It is just full of just gems everywhere you look. I mean, I remember the timbers that you found that were floated in the lake that we went and got, and then we had to build a sled, the chainsaw to mill them.
Oh yeah,
and all that, and it's full of sand.
I know we were trying to figure out, and then you had to sharpen your chainsaw every
2 feet or something. Yeah, because it was just full of sand and just destroying my chain.
The latest thing actually too that I'm just working on, and so this is 5 days that I told Mickey, my son, I'm like, from your bedroom. At first I was thinking I was going to do a fire pole or something down there, but it's well, if you have this big gaping hole, I don't want kids to fall down it and, safety, whatever, because you're not legally allowed to have that stuff. And so what I actually did, I'm probably incriminating myself as I say this, but anyway.
You got your final inspection.
Yeah, it's all done. So anyway, but what I did is I actually, in the floor system between upstairs and downstairs, I made this square in there. So that after I got inspection, I'd floor it over it, drywall over it, so you can't see it. And so got the inspection. So now I've taken out the drywall. So now I have the chute that goes up to my son's room. And I was trying to figure out different ways to have something safe, with a hatch. And so actually just last week, I picked up for free on Facebook, there was a stair lift for people, seniors to go down the thing. And so I picked one of those up and I rewired it, took it all apart. And so I'm going to create a platform on it. And they're not supposed to go straight up. They're supposed to be on a 45 or like that. But I've already tested it. It picks up 350 pounds. And my son's only I don't know. I mean, he's probably close to 100 pounds or something. But anyway, and so I'll strap that to the wall. And then there's this remote. You just stand on it. You press the thing right up through the hatch in his floor. I can't wait. I want to make something like
It's a redneck elevator.
Oh, it's a redneck
That's
elevator.
awesome.
So hopefully that works. But
Yeah, you could sell it someday as a house with an elevator, but don't show any pictures or anything. Just
Yeah,
says
it's true.
technically it's got an elevator.
well, I figure if Steph and I stay in the house till we're like gray and old, instead of taking
You'll
the
need
stairs,
it.
I'll just be able to take the stair lift up.
Okay, let's do a quick gallop through our career histories, just to kind of catch people up to your guys' situations. So mine's been spoken of in a fair bit of depth, in that basically I've been in construction, building homes, and then transitioned into the tool belt company here about 6.5 years ago ish, when I kind of started that, and do this now. So give us a quick gallop through your career history. Speed round. So kind of go through your jobs you've had and what you've done.
So when we met in 1999, shortly after that is when you hatched the idea to go learn framing. We went together up north. And so my first kind of career was construction. I did it for about 8 years, but I did around the time when we were building our houses is when I stepped out of Akribis. And after I finished my house, I started doing a bunch of other stuff in construction. I did siding, I did roofing, I did gutters, I did stonework, all just because I thought it was fun to try different things, but the opportunities were there to just help different people that we had connections with. But none of it really felt like, man, this is it. This is what I want to do. Because I knew I didn't really want to do framing forever, which is why I was happy to step out of Akribis at the time. But that led to my wife and I starting a photography business. And so we went and did that for a few years, did weddings. I did sports photography. Brad helped me on a couple projects doing photographing downhill skateboarding, which was really sweet. Our epic adventure driving through the night into Goldendale, Washington, drove all the way through the night, hiked up and down that amazing Mary Hill and the Mary Hill Festival of Speed. And we were hiking up and down and then jumped back in the car and drove back.
And you got pulled over?
No,
Yes,
we?
You did. You got a speeding ticket.
Oh,
Remember?
yeah. No, I had forgotten about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, speeding ticket. But I remember the drive back because we had synced it up with, like, we had done a wedding and photographed the wedding. Then you and I took off.
Yeah.
And it was so awesome. But I remember at one point, actually, on the way there, and it was like this crazy, clear, dark night. And we were who knows where, because you're traveling in the dark. And at that point, I think we had just a GPS or map. It wasn't no like iPhone business.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of like just going for it, traveling through who knows where. And I remember we had both had to pee. And so we pull over it's forest, and there was like a bridge. And for whatever reason, we both were like, let's pee off the bridge. So we run back, we pull over, run back to the bridge, and we're standing there having a leak off the bridge. Just kind of like, wow, it's so nice. And I remember both of us never said anything to each other, but both of us were overcome by this fear because it's like this huge full moon. And we're peeing, having a leak, and as you're kind of laughing and chuckling, and it's cold, and so we're like, and then we hear this like, and we were kind of looking around, quickly trying to finish peeing, and then walking, but getting faster and faster and faster, running back to the vehicle, and we jump in, shut the doors, and get going. And I remember both of us being like, "Did you hear that sound?" And quickly trying to get in the car.
Yeah.
But we slept in the car.
Yeah.
Drove home, and I remember the drive home, us switching.
Yep.
But I was so tired. There was honestly hours I didn't even remember.
Yep.
And we get back, and I'm like, I don't even know how we made it back.
Yep.
No,
I remember that. And honestly, I honestly do remember getting pulled over. Something the difference between a Canadian police officer and an American one. Like when a Canadian one pulls me over, I'm like, hey, yeah, okay, here's my information, this thing, and thanks a lot.
Yeah.
There's something I'm like, when the American guy pulled out, I was like, you gonna shoot us? Like, you watch all these like stuff online of like crazy things that some of the American cops, and so I remember like, just like show me your stuff and just, I don't know, do you got a bunch of money you could just give them? Yeah, like,
Yep. But so we did photography for a few years, and then went and lived in the Gulf Islands and directed a small Bible camp We worked with foster kids, inner city kids. We did that for 5 years. We ran like along with the camp, we did a program for like a gap year program for kids coming out of high school, and they lived with us at the camp. We had some starting beginnings of like doing a little bit of, I got a big, huge garden and orchard, and we really believed in community and wanted to create opportunities for kids that had come from pretty rough childhoods to have a bit of experience of family and working together. And I remember trying to teach guys how to work, and they didn't want to climb ladders. They didn't want to wear steel-toed boots. And I'm like, what's with these young people? And it made me feel like so old, but it was that was an amazing time. And then after that, I managed a woodworking shop. Then I started a business where I did marketing and management, HR support for small businesses, and did that for a bunch of different companies, and then ended up getting into more doing illustration and graphic design more full time, and was able to work with a lot of neat companies, and ended up kind of work started to dry up. I ended up working for a friend of mine who has this unique business where he would gather kind of discarded wood from around the area in southern Alberta and would mill it up, dry it, and sell it slabs and build furniture for people. And so I worked with him. That was really cool, being able to build some furniture with him. And then ended up moving back to Summerland, was a youth pastor, and then an associate pastor, and then now I'm here. So a pretty long variety of things.
Yeah.
So many. And what about you?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess my work thing, again, didn't grow up like Luke doing the construction stuff. It's really strange to me that that's pretty much all you've done. Not like in a negative. That's not
True though. I know.
But yeah, like it's weird. I'm like, when I think back on it, I'm like, it's always been that stuff. Like it's like mowing lawns was like probably the first thing back in the day. And then it just right into construction.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, for me, I was again more into, my dad is a really social person, loved kind of like a lot more of those kind of social jobs, really good with people. So he was into the restaurant stuff. And then on Thetis, he was like a conference coordinator, dealing with people. So I think I had a certain amount of that. I enjoyed people. I enjoyed hosting. I enjoyed that. And so that kind of led me down more of the restaurant thing, right? So I mean, I worked at Starbucks. I worked at as a cook in Edmonton at like Julio's Barrio, all you Edmontonians, the Iron Horse, the Billiard Club, places like that. And so like I really enjoyed that stuff. And then when I came to Summerland, I worked in another coffee shop, and then I would kind of like jump into construction. Like I learned, and I was with you for a solid, I don't know how many years, but then I would kind of go off and I would do another thing. We started a coffee van, which actually, Dustin, you did all the design, like you did our logo and a bunch of that stuff, which was, I still am so proud of how, when people hear a coffee van, I'm not talking like we got like a little safari van and turned it into like, some pots of coffee at the back of the hatch.
Oh, it was wicked.
It was really wicked, because when my wife and I were in Australia, that was a big thing that they have in Australia, is a lot of the coffee that they have there. They had these wicked little like Mercedes vans, and they would open up the back and they would have like a legit, really nice Ranchilio coffee espresso machine in the back. And that's how they had these things set up all over the place. And they would go from business to business. And it wasn't like this lame food truck. Not that food trucks are lame. I know some of those are amazing. But so we came back to Canada and we're like, I wonder if we could, just because it was like winter and stuff like that, we thought in the wintertime, I don't want to be outside. I wonder if there's some way we could, have this mobile, you could actually come into the back of the van. And then this is the time when like the Dodge Sprinter, like those big, tall vans were just coming out. Like, we hadn't really seen them. And so we ended up getting our hands on like one of those big Dodge Sprinter vans that you could stand up. We had this folding stair that came back and you would walk right up into the back of the van. We had like nice flooring in it. We floored it with like interior proper flooring, this little bench in there. We had like pictures, these little pot lights that came down. And then there was like this big stainless steel countertop with like a nice Ranchillo lever pull like that.
Coolest
That was
machine.
like the Ferrari of
We have to
coffee
get one in
machines.
this shop.
I know. I would
thing was
love
so
one
awesome.
of those. Like so cool.
It looked
Anyway,
like stacks on a big diesel truck. And you use
Yeah.
big levers. You'd press the. Oh,
so
cool.
sweet. And so again, it was like a little bit of an art project too to create this vehicle that just like you'd pull up somewhere and people would be like, "Holy crap! There's a coffee shop inside. It feels and looks and
along with painting the picture,
yes,
the name of it was
the Valley Grind."
Yep.
Yeah. And it's funny because the original name, I was out on the lake. I was looking around. I'm like, what is that? Trying to figure out a good name. And I thought of the Daily Grind. That was the name that I wanted it to be. And I'm like, the Daily Grind. Cause it's like, we're going serving it to people and they're in the daily grind, the work thing, but it's grind of coffee. This is brilliant. No one's ever thought of this. I go online. I'm like, go to check and see see the domain name, make my wicked website. And it's like, the Daily Grind, every coffee shop, everyone's thought of it. And there's all these different logos. I'm like, okay. And I'm not that original. So the Valley Grind, anything.
Yeah.
So anyway, but then the recession hit and basically that just shut thing down. 2008, I believe that was. And so all the places that we were serving, everyone just went to like skeleton crew and all of our customers were just like gone. So that shut down.
Yeah.
And then after that, I ended up getting into like the school district. My wife is a teacher and I ended up getting into the school district as well as an EA and then getting into a behavior intervention thing where I basically worked with all the kids in the district that had like severe behavior coming from various backgrounds, similar to the kids that you would have had at camp, that just come from really struggling and just fell in love with those type of kids and just like some of these kids that we think are just, a lost cause and they're whatever are the most beautiful kids inside. Once you get to know them and you hear their story, hear what they've gone through, and then you get to see these kids and be a part of their life and help them succeed. And so that was a really cool thing. Did that for several years. And then, and through all of my job, I've always been into video stuff a little bit, just kind of messing around with video stuff. And then eventually, similar to you doing photography, one thing kind of leads to another. And so I still kind of continue to do that stuff. Even working here at the shop, I get to do some of that stuff and for different things around the community. And
that was a time I remember being amazed with your level of patience and understanding for those kids, because that's a major difference between you and I.
Right.
And like your sense of empathy and understanding and social awareness for those kids. And you became the kind of go-to guy in the whole area here as like, if you can get Brad to be in your class to deal with that, you get assigned the most challenging kids in the area. And then the stories I remember you telling me about kids throwing chairs through windows and like crazy stuff that the one I thought was so funny that I want you to tell was the kid that climbed up onto the top of the playground stuff with a whole bunch of rocks.
Yeah, that's right.
How did that one go?
Again, like for those of you that work with these subjects, like they become the norm. Like you're just like, that's just what happens. But yeah, this kid came and in the particular playground, it's all that pea gravel or whatever like that. And again, it was brilliant because we were all trying to like rally around and make sure that he's safe, but also that all the other kids are safe, because some of these kids can be pretty unsafe. And he just filled his pockets and everything with all this gravel and got to the top of this playground. And like, if you got close, you were going to get a handful of rocks in the face. And he was just like whipping rocks at people. And it was just like, that was a really, really intense one. But another one I would say.
But how did that finish? Because that's what I wanted to.
Honestly, I don't even.
I remember because you told it to me. So I remember you talking about you guys cleared all the kids off the playground and you and I thought the principal were standing off to the side and he ran out of rocks. And you were watching him out of the corner of your eye, waiting for him to get the ground so you can go get a hold of him.
Get a hold of him, that's right.
And you talked about how he climbed down super slow. He was watching you and he didn't think you were watching him.
Yeah.
And as soon as his feet touched the ground, you bolted over and he screamed.
Screamed at the top of his lungs.
And you went trucking over there and got a hold of him and was able to calm the situation down.
It's not like a tackle. You can't do that. And you have to have, like, we had to go through training on how to restrain kids to make sure that, it was as safe as possible. And, you want to do all that stuff to have the least impact on them. So they're not going to have this traumatic experience and stuff. But the one that I remember, which was still, it's funny in my mind is I had this one kid that something had happened at school. So I had him in the office and we're And then all of a sudden the fire alarm went, just this random thing. So all of a sudden everybody has to go outside. So I'm with this kid outside. And then so the fire trucks and everything come and they check the school out, all fine. Everybody could go back in. And so we're going back in and I'm supposed to go to this other class. And so I say to the two principals, I'm like, you guys got this guy here, you're all good? You know, and they're like, yeah, no problem, we're fine. So I go back into school while all the kids are coming back to school. And I look out the window once I get back in. And this little dude has realized that like I'm not there and the principals aren't paying attention, and he's running across the field all the way across to the fence. And so I'm like on the window yelling at the principals, he's running away. And so they turn around. And so you see these two like, you know, principals in past their prime trying to run after this kid. Kid hits the fence up over this big fence, jumps off into the neighborhood and into the city. Just like takes off down the thing there. And so like, we're all on the radios and we're like, you know, called the police. They're like, there's a kid who's run off. And we found him in a grocery store. He had hidden on one of the shelves in a grocery store, like cleared all the macaroni and all the stuff and made this big spot and then like crawled in there and so you couldn't even see him when you're down the aisles. Brilliant hiding spot, you know, and then ended up finding him. But again, a fantastic kid, like all said and done, like, you know.
Well, it's funny bumping into some of those kids that you worked with from years and years ago now. And like, oh, you're fairly well adjusted. You're holding down a job and the impact that was had through your patience with them. That's so cool. So that outlines a little bit, just like the differences in our personalities, being that I'm somewhat analytical, you're very social, and you can kind of end up on the emotional, passionate side of things with our endeavors. And so I want to talk a little bit about what that's like in a work environment when you're working with and around and for people of very different personality types. I know, like for me, with my history of building, I was just thinking this morning, for some reason, I think almost all of my employers, when I was working for other people, were Frenchmen, which is strange. Like I think 5 of them, 5 of the 6, maybe the guys that I ever worked under were French guys. I'm not sure what it was about French guys coming to Western Canada and then being successful and somewhat.
And when we say French guys, for the rest of the people, this is like
people from Quebec
French, which is the French-speaking province of
in Eastern Canada. I mean, the stereotype is that they were angry Frenchmen. Was my experience, and that was fairly true for the guys that I worked with. They were somewhat short-tempered and somewhat intense, but also very, very good, precise builders. Knew what they wanted and how to get it. But it was interesting working under those sort of people, because I always looked at those employers that I had. For some reason, I wanted to be a really good employee. I wanted to be a rock star employee that they were really keen on, but I always thought in the back of my mind, if I'm ever an employer someday, what characteristics do I want to bring to my business? You know, there's elements of each of those guys that I really, really wanted to adopt and have part of my future, if that was something I got into. And there was definitely things that I didn't want to include as well. Working under these Frenchmen, and then working, you know, on crews under, you know, a foreman, you know, some of them that were like really, really just stereotypical tradespeople that were like, you know, I can't stand working with stupid people. I remember one of my bosses saying, and I'm like, well, I know you're not happy with everybody on the crew at times, so we're all just stupid people to you. And then some of the coworkers that I had, you know, I remember with some guys, it was pretty sad, but on a payday, you know, buddy doesn't have a vehicle. He's like, yeah, can you drop me off at Money Mart? And he goes straight in, cashes his check, straight to the pub, total rock star for the weekend, buying drinks for everybody, broke my Monday. Yeah. Right? Like, it's such a shame. And there's abuse in that. And there's other guys that had, I remember a fellow named Tom, who was like a wicked, awesome framer. And he had his own companies at times, and he got burnt bad by, I think, a business partner, and basically ended up bankrupt and ended up going back to just work for other people. He's like, I just keep it super simple now. And he was a great framer and just a gem of a guy. You know, my employees that I had over the years, I had all sorts that I had work for me. You know, some guys that were living off the grid, very unique, quirky, weird characters that were like super hardworking, but in some ways somewhat naive and gullible, but still like really reliable and great, loving people. Such a wide range. And in the midst of all that, to be a good coworker and a good employer to those people was a matter of respecting the people around me and respecting who they were, and that you can't treat everybody all the same. And we've talked about this in my family, with my kids, is that fair is not always equal, which is a really true thing that I think is worth embracing in any kind of social interaction. It's the easiest thing to just be fair across the board. And I thought about that, as having kids. I'm going to treat them all exactly the same. I'm going to be super consistent, and it'll be super fair, and it'll be, I might have to have some hard discussions, but it'll be somewhat black and white and somewhat easy. Well, then you have kids that are wired so different from one another. With my kids, I can have one that I can raise my voice a little bit and they crumple and cry and they fall apart. Other kids that are like, will stand their ground and need far more deliberate, intentional interaction, discipline to actually make any kind of a dent at all. So it's interesting. Like I find there's a fine balance of like being sensitive to the people that you're around, but still maintaining consistency and trying to be as fair as possible. Like you can't land on any extreme. Because there's this point in the middle. If I'm going to respect people properly, I have to cater to who they are as an individual to a reasonable degree. And one thing that Dad always told us that stuck with me forever was that my job as an employee is to make my boss's job a joy. And if you're ever an employer, it's your job to make your employee's job a joy. And I think if both of those things are done from both sides, it's like in marriage, if that's done, you're working for the benefit of the other person, you end up with a really, really positive environment. And when the hard times come, you're able to proactively work through them together. And even if it's only one-sided, you still end up with the best possible situation that you could have.
What do you find, like, being on both sides, what's easier?
As far as employee or employee?
Yeah, to make your boss's job a joy or to make your employee's job a joy?
That's a good question. I think as an employee, it's simpler, but I'd say it's more rewarding as an employer. Is how I think I would define that. As an employee, it's you can kind of look at your environment and your surroundings and look at how can I be an asset here? How can I be proactive? How can I have forethought of the upcoming steps we're going to be engaged in and get ahead of it so that my boss comes to ask me, I'm already engaged. But also doing that carefully, because I also don't want to make the wrong decision and actually be counterproductive, which I've had employees do that. They think, oh, I'm going to do this thing and get way ahead. And they endeavor to get ahead as they see it by starting some kind of a project. And then we come across it and like, oh, I see what you're trying to do there. I appreciate the attention, but that actually just means now that we can't do our point loads, or we who knows, there's all kinds of negative consequences. They don't have a big picture of it. But that pursuit of like trying to make your boss's job a joy, I think is somewhat, as long as you don't have an employer that won't be satisfied ever. You can have really nasty employers at times. But I think it's a fairly simple, straightforward pursuit to make your boss's job a joy and your superior workmates a joy, your coworkers. From an employer standpoint, that's far more complex because you're in a position of authority and leadership, which can be a position that people feel threatened and intimidated. And I also want to be their friend and be respectful, but there is a working relationship that needs to exist. But when it's done well, which isn't always the case, it's really, really satisfying when you see other people thrive that you're able to invest in and they're able to maintain a livelihood and enjoy their work. Like that's super, super satisfying. And a huge part of that respect and that working well is when I fall short of executing that well, is then having the humility to be like, hey, what I did or said in that situation, there was a lot going on and maybe I was too short and rash and other things going on. That's on me, to model that humility, to be like, I screwed up and I apologize for that, because it's so easy, especially in the trades world, it seems that, people are like, I want to be a boss someday so I can be an asshole to everybody else. You know, I can finally be in charge and I can say what's what, which is such a crappy motivation.
Yeah, and how many of those people are successful when they want to just, it's like you hear that and you're like, it'll be interesting to look you up in 5 years and see how that went.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
I hear all the time, like, you know, over your career, how has it been? Like, how do you end up with employees? Isn't it so hard to find employees?
Yeah.
Like, no, I've always had no problem finding employees because I've tried to foster an environment that people would want to be a part of what we're doing. So I get the best people coming to me asking for work.
Well, I think one thing I noticed too early on when you guys started the company, it took a while for me to realize that as there was more employees coming on, I'm like, these guys are buying houses because of this company. These guys are, you know, they're able to like buy presents for their kids and to bring up families. And again, just I don't think I really, because I've never had employees, really understanding the weight that is, you know? And so when work is short, when you go through a time and maybe it's you know, it's the way things are financially in the country or whatever like that. And there's a shortage, you know, how you would have to carry that. Like, if I don't have work, Buddy doesn't get to put that payment on his house or that vehicle or, you know, so what's it like kind of carrying that weight?
That's definitely a weight. And that comes with a trust and a faith that, you know, you basically have to do the best with the time that you've got, be as prepared as possible. And when things go sideways, you roll with it the best you can. I mean, there was some times that seemed to be divine intervention where things came together when I was like, I'm not sure how this is going to work out. I remember finishing a project and I had the next couple projects lined up. We had 5 guys on the crew and we were just wrapping up a house on a Friday, starting a fresh one on a Monday. And I got a call on Friday that the other job fell through. Someone else took it and I just got the shaft. I was like, I've got 5 guys to start on Monday. And now all of a sudden out of nowhere, we don't have work. And I was fortunate enough over my career that I think we maybe had in the 16 years I was working, we didn't have work in total for maybe 2 weeks. Like we were able to just go straight through the recession, through 2008, all of that stuff. We didn't stop. But that particular instance was probably the most acute example where we were dump off a job. We didn't get a job. It was supposed to start on Monday. And I got called on Saturday by somebody else who was like, hey, you guys are always busy. You're never available. But I had someone pull out of our job. It's supposed to start Monday. We are in a complete pinch. I just figured I'd rather hear you say no than have not called to ask. But like, it's ready to go. Is there any chance you can fit it in? I was like, yep. We had another job that fell through and we are clear and ready to go Monday morning.
Yep.
And we just slipped into that and we went to, I'm like, so again, you do your best to be as prepared as possible. And it's like I've said before, that my favorite quote from The Incredibles is luck favors the prepared. And not always. There's still stuff that goes sideways that's unfortunate and you know, things break down and it's inconvenient. But more often than not, as I look back, you know, whether it's divine intervention or favor of the universe, whatever you want to call it, there has been a good number of times I can look back and be like, that just fell together in a way that I can't explain. And I'm just going to be grateful for it and try to be a good steward of your good fortune. Yeah. So I think that responsibility of my employees was something I took very seriously. And I there was times I'd kind of take it on the chin and be like, you know, when it comes down to it, I'll put myself at a loss to make sure that my employees are covered. And make sure that their livelihoods aren't put in jeopardy, you know, because of circumstances that don't have anything to do with them.
Yep.
But yeah, that's always kind of a lasting pressure.
That also makes me think a little bit, this is kind of on topic, kind of not, but when, cause I know I did it, and everybody probably has a story when they have a product. So in construction, you've got some glue lamb, 27 feet long, and someone's like, okay, make sure you cut it, whatever. And one of your employees lops off like an extra foot or that 1.5 inches or the one, like all those little things. How do you deal with like things like that when an employee like misunderstands something and just craps the bed?
Well, that's I think an important part of like how you price jobs, and you have to build in some interior insurance because that sort of stuff just happens. And if you've cut your margins so tight that you've allowed no margin for things to go awry from time to time, it's a matter of time until you lose your shirt.
Yeah.
You can only, eat that stuff for so long. The fortunate thing on some of the projects we were on where there was some of those errors made, like I was doing a development where we built, 130 houses, and we'd have, up to 7 projects on the go at a time. And so if there was a mistake made that was substantial, chances are pretty good that we could actually shuffle product from one project to the other and kind of make things work. And the odd time, I had to head down to the lumberyard and buy a brand new LVL or, order something and just take it on the chin. That sort of thing was, fortunately, with the guys that I had trained up, it was really rare.
Yeah.
But there were times that it happened. And anyone who's framed for any length of time knows how easy it is to flip numbers in your head.
Yeah.
And when you're reading your tape upside down and you screw something up, like those are sick feeling moments.
I remember like when that would happen, especially if it was a bit of a smaller crew and you're pretty aware of what's going on, and then you could see a bit of commotion, I'm up on the roof and I'm like, oh, something seems a little off down there. And someone's kind of like, and then they kind of like mention, you see somebody else go talk there, and then someone's like, are you serious? And then Luke comes over, what's going on? I cut this a foot short. It's like, are you serious? And then just like that, you just feel the weight of this poor guy that made this thing, and then I remember when it happened to you, like you cut something wrong, and I'm like, yes, Luke cut that beam wrong. Suck on that. Like this, not, I was actually that excited, but I'm curious. Do you remember, either of you, some of the biggest whoopses?
Oh, the one that comes to mind, which ended up not being a big deal, fortunately, was on building the Conrad's house. And I put a foundation wall on the wrong side of the line.
I remember that.
So, it's the one spot you can get away with it. I was so fortunate. Oftentimes a spot where you can make a mistake is, say you've got just a basic structure, and in that structure, there's a garage that's a part of it. And the inside 2 walls of the garage, which you're doing a foundation for, depending on the plans and how it's drawn, you can have outside to outside measurements. You can have center to center measurements. You can have outside to center measurements. There's all different ways that can be drawn, which I would always recommend trying to work with the same designer and having the amount of discussions I've had with designers when they're drawing up plans to be like, I want your plans drawn this way.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to add up 8 window center measurements to get this wall placement. Give me that, and then measure back. So whether it was a plan issue or just an oversight on my part, which probably it was, at footing stage, you're doing your center to center measurements, and I went the wrong way on a footing. And then it's an even foot measurement, and you go to do your walls, like clearly the wall goes here. Don't bother checking the plans. And we got to, I think, floor joist time, and we put our floor joists on, and my floor joists were all hanging 8 inches extra over one side. That's a lot of waste. And I-joists usually are cut long.
Yeah.
And was it that way? Is the other way? Can't remember when we caught it, but I caught it in time to adjust material. And the only thing that ended up happening is the garage ended up being 8 inches shallower in its depth. And it didn't end up having any implications. Truss bearing was fine. It wasn't a load bearing wall up at that point. And so I was fortunate to get away with that one. Let the homeowners know, and it being a non-issue at all. The laundry room was a little bit bigger or something. But doing a foundation wall in the wrong location, that sucked. There's been the odd time you're doing footings for deck, and you put a column in the wrong space, in the wrong spot, or that. But I fortunately don't have any like tremendously bad moments. We had a few blowouts in concrete, like a lot of the building around here, because it's such hilly terrain. Sometimes you're building, we had footings where I think we had 26 steps in our footing. The elevation from the top portion of the footings to the bottom, in a small footprint, you might have 20 vertical feet of it stepping down to the bottom, and there's like 4-foot steps, and then you're on the side slope, and you got like your footing is 3.5, 4 feet deep on one side and 8 inches deep. But there's that's such a side slope when you're pinned into bedrock, and you're trying to brace the crap of that low side. And
Didn't you call that one? Wasn't it just up the road here? You had a name for it. Was it the asshole?
Yep.
That's what it was. Yeah.
That was a miserable one. But there's other ones, where you're like, you're pouring your footings, and we called them cattle chutes because they were just at times so deep to get your levels where you wanted them. And you're pouring the concrete and you're placing it all. And I always like to vibrate. I would a pencil vibrator and we'd vibrate them so like the footings all looked really nice. Got them full and like something's vibrating along. And all of a sudden you watch the concrete just like, oh no, where's it coming out? And you look and something's blowing out of the bottom and there's concrete flowing down
it's
the
always
hillside.
that fine line because I remember like people being like, yep, vibrate, but don't stay down there too long. Right. Like just get it, and then come out. Otherwise you're going to have issues.
Yeah. I'll think about that more because I'm sure there's a few other ones, but those
you
are
have Dustin? Do you have any that?
I don't.
I mean, you probably didn't really make any mistakes.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is I wasn't usually the person in charge.
Right.
I remember when we were doing those condos in Peachland, having to move the entire length of the one exterior wall.
That's right.
And we had to slide it in. And I remember that tension you describe of like, how much is this going to cost us to in time to move a whole length of the entire series of, I don't know what it was, 4 to 6 condos, the wall having to come in.
And that was just that we missed on the plan that the exterior wall didn't carry, went from exterior wall to floor system, and there's a 1 foot jog.
Yeah.
And it went up, there's gonna be an eyebrow roof, and we missed that 1 foot.
Yeah.
To bring the exterior walls, because you just like naturally, you're like default is they just stack. You just go, and that wall was inside. So there were like interior walls and closets. And
I remember going along, throw your claws in the bottom plate, reef on it, all the way along, which is when I had the wonderful experience of the claws popping out just as we're, I don't know how the 10th time we're doing it, boom, throw it in the plate, reef on it. I reef, the claws pop out, and my back foot goes right through a vent hole. And I was wearing shorts, and my shins hit the edge of the plywood, and it just curls up all the skin on my leg, just into
it's like
a
one
nice
of those
pile.
like what do you like the
Like if you're scraping the tape, old tape off of a skateboard or something.
like a plane, that just leaves that nice little coil of like,
or a scraper, you get that nice peel.
Yeah, it was a real nice peel. And then it's just that gray white tissue underneath, and you're like,
It just starts to ooze out.
yeah.
Like I'm similar to you. I made countless mistakes, but because I wasn't in control, I wasn't the boss. And even when there was more employees, I wasn't often left as the guy to lead the crew. The few times I think I probably failed miserably. And so it was pretty quick that I wasn't the guy to cut the big expensive beams and stuff like that, like.
I remember bosses freaking out though. Like the guys we've worked for in the past, losing their temper, kicking a whole lift of studs and actually moving studs in the pile.
Yeah, wasn't that a full lift of studs that were still banded together?
Yep.
With lath in it, and he booted the bottom.
Yep.
And kicked like 4 2x6, like 8 inches out the other side or something.
Yep. And another time, a new guy onto the crew made a mistake, and he lost it and threw a sledgehammer clear across the whole house. Just did it like Olympic. What's that thing with the chain and the ball at the end? Hammer throw. And he just like whipped it around the house, and I stood up. I'm like, you cannot do that. In that moment, and the guy was like trembling because the boss is losing it, and he just took off and got in his truck and drove away.
Yeah, I mean, I think even on our crew that there was, I remember some things getting thrown. I'm sure you threw some stuff. I don't know if you threw much stuff, but I mean, I remember a handful of times, whether it was me or Luke or other guys in the crew, like. You don't know what guys are going through either. Sometimes you think it's not just as simple as like, oh, that didn't work out, so I'm throwing my hammer. Like you throw in, family and kids and sleepless nights and relational issues and weather and all these different things, and then it can be the smallest little thing, and pretty soon you've got
I remember
flying through the air.
I remember 2 instances that come to mind for me when I snapped a little bit, and one was on our first build. Their company, and I built stairs wrong and had to pull them apart. And I was pissed, pulling these stairs apart, ripping the risers off and driving my nail bar in. And one thing about concrete and framing is that it's a very physical job. Like you can get away with beating on something and being rough and smashing stuff and not really wrecking anything.
And get a bit of anger out while you're doing it. And you're like,
it kind of feels good.
Yeah, exactly.
You make a mistake, you got to rebuild something, you got to pull something apart. Well, that's coming apart in a hurry. And I'm going to vent, which is not really good practice. Yeah. It's not, doesn't exercise restraint. It's the opposite. It actually allows you to like let out this rage in a way that is probably unhealthy. Yeah. But it's acceptable.
But at the same time, sometimes appropriate. I think sometimes we don't allow ourselves to have that output. Like, because again, if there's that angry, there is a certain part that I think can be healthy, but it can quickly enter the unhealthy part, right?
So I remember pulling those stairs apart and driving my nail bar in to try and pull something. It got stuck. Okay. And that was just one more thing. And I just two-hand with my hammer, just side hit my nail puller mid-shank to just knock it loose. Mm-hmm. And it came loose and sailed across the whole living room and out the front door opening and bounced on the driveway. Mm. And I'm like, oh, geez, if that had hit anybody. Yeah. Bad news. And I remember another employee who had built something wrong a couple times and I was getting frustrated. And I looked back and it had been done wrong again. And I came over like, no, not like that. And it was jacks over header. And I came over and just started smashing these jacks out. And I remember the employee was kind of like, whoa. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of like semi-justified in like having to repair it, but I just got fed up and I let loose a bit and ended up having to have a discussion after the fact that, hey, that was not cool. I came unglued. You weren't doing anything malicious, but I was my patience was done. I couldn't handle anymore. And I remember feeling bad, to this day, that still like bugs me how I responded in that moment.
I don't think that was me, but yeah, no, definitely. The only other one, as far as a big mistake, the one that sticks out to me was one that you had, which was quite cool, the roof off the mother sucker.
Oh, well,
right. We came up with a name for it or no, was that the one?
Okay. So there's a bit of context with this one. Yeah. So this one actually wasn't my fault because I had actually become aware of what seemed like a discrepancy on the plans and brought it to the attention of the builder, to Scott.
Yeah, yes.
I'm like, this says this here and here. Does that make it? This doesn't make sense. No. What? No. And he designed the place and had the architect do it. And he's like, no, that's not the case. This is here. Okay, fine. Because
I remember you guys working it out and you both kind of agreed that this was
this isn't right. I'm like, okay, great. Because this just shows this. I want to make sure. No. And then it was a really cool house. Tons of hand frame, I-joist roof vaults and arches, and really cool. And so we got the upper floor going, and we got to the point where I'm like, I need to now make sure the trusses are coming. I'm going to confirm dimensions. I always like to talk to the truss companies and dial in dimensions and make sure they're happy and answer any questions, tell them the layout that I want. Some truss companies, their designers think they're doing the framers a favor and they'll over engineer or overdo their layout to think they're helping us, and it doesn't help at all. So for instance, a simple example, say you got a basic box, it's a hip roof, and I've had designers before, instead of putting your trusses 2 foot on center from the corner, they go 23 1/4 so that your sheets are going to land in the middle of a truss instead of having to cut it for a sheet. On a hip roof, it doesn't matter because you have a hip. You're starting with a sheet that is coming down to the corner. There is no 3/4 to worry about. And when you have certain structures and different roof lines hitting, that actually causes more trouble than help. So they can overdo things. So anyway, all of that to say, I talked to the truss company and we're going through all the details and I'm confirming everything. And we're talking about, and he's like, yeah. And then, these trusses are here. This is fine because that 1 foot step thing. I'm like, sorry, what? Well, the designer had this 1 foot step in the floor here and here, which, it's kind of an odd detail, but because of all of these things, he had to do that. So, we've built the trusses for this 1 foot step. Like that 1 foot. Oh, that 1 foot. Okay, explain this more. And we get around and all of a sudden it clicks in my head. I'm looking at the plans like, oh no. Oh, that 1 foot that I talked to Scott about, that did have to be that. That wasn't misdrawn. That was done so that, there was like a headroom in the stairs or what. I can't remember now exactly what the reason was.
After we'd already built it.
After we'd built it. So we'd put the floor down. And we used to call when we were time to put a floor on and to sheet it, we'd say, we're laying the smack down.
Yeah.
So that was always the term we'd throw around.
And then there was the song, Tear the Roof Off the Mother Sucker.
Yeah.
And so
Undercover Brother, whatever that was the movie.
Right.
And so basically in the end of the day, what had happened is there's a slab on grade and we'd framed the whole bottom. And then there was the upper floor was all framed, and we had the garage. There was a bonus room over the garage, and that was all the same height when the garage was supposed to be a foot lower than the rest of the house. So we had this big, like 2-bay garage with workshop, big space that the entire floor is a foot too tall. So I talked to Scott and I'm like, we got a problem. And we're looking at, and then it snaps for him. He's like, oh, and we talked about, yeah, shoot. Okay. We looked at options and we were like, can we leave it and do this and change this? And they're like, no, it's got to be brought down. Okay, we'll bring it down. So we had to move the smack down. This is what we ended up calling it. So what we ended up doing is we got scaffolding all in the garage, and we cranked it all up and cranked all the legs up. We put legs in the bottom and the top, and we put runners across the ceiling against the joists, cranked everything super tight with these like 4 sets of scaffolding. And then we took Sawzalls and cut all the nails loose. And then we cut with saws from both sides. And we cut a foot of the wall out. Well, the whole floor is now suspended on scaffolding. And then we put new plates on, tied all together. And then we all had to then lower the smack, lower the floor down. And you're hitting the feet and you're just like trying to have this thing not collapse. Once like that, we had to lower this whole thing a foot and then dropped it, nailed it back up. By the time we're done, you'd never know we had to do it.
I remember like being on the scaffolding and like having all these guys at different corners, and you're like tapping yours, come down a little bit. And okay, now you tap yours a little bit, and you tap yours, and the whole thing coming down a foot. And it was like this ominous thing of having like thousands of pounds over your head, and you're wondering, if I tap it, is something just gonna like?
It didn't feel good.
No, it didn't feel good, but
But yeah, we got it done. But that's right. That was a
good one.
Interesting. That's part of the fun of regaling the history is like the things that you had to do that you made happen and got away with, and then you think of the things that could have gone wrong.
Yeah.
Oh man, there's so many stories.
Yeah.
I mean, I fortunately kind of got through my construction years without shooting myself in the hands with spikers, and without getting my spine torn out or legs broken from getting knocked down from high places and trusses blowing over. And I remember some big, huge radius top picture windows putting in, and you were up in a second floor, you build scaffolding, and the scaffolding is a little bit too far away from the wall. So you lift it up and you're getting out there. I'm like, oh, this is like, this like test run is now like the full commitment. We have to do it. And it's sliding through my hands, and like, this goes in now, or it falls, we fall, the scaffolding goes apart, we land, 16 feet below.
Wouldn't come apart.
Oh, no. Yeah. There's scaffolding Bradley built one time where he went through a box of nails. It was insane.
I think it's because I built bad scaffolding one time. And not that it fell apart, but it was like brought to my attention, like
sketchy.
It's sketchy. And so then after that, I just overbuilt scaffolding, and I became known as just like, again, probably shouldn't build it because I would overbuild it like crazy. And, because that's the thing is like you would build scaffolding, there's a piece of wood here, and then you have thing that comes down here. It's like this triangle, these few nails, it'll support gazillions, but I just didn't have that brain at the time. So like to make something strong.
Yeah. You do it in a unique way. Yeah. Like, oh, that's interesting. And you're like, oh, but if this happens, it could move that. Okay, I'll put a brace there. And then I'll put a brace there. And I'll brace that brace. And then I'm just going to put some more stuff on.
Yeah.
So pulling it apart, you're like, what's going on here?
I was just thinking about the, difference in personalities that you had started talking about, and how for myself, a lot of the shift in how I approach things happened after my car accident, which happened early on in our friendship. Having something like that happen where you almost die, it changes how you perceive things. And I think there were good aspects and negative ones. Having that experience helped me in a lot of ways overcome fears. At that time, Christy and I almost broke up at that time. We were just dating because I couldn't figure out what I was going to do with my life, and was too afraid to propose to her. Like, I can't marry you. I don't know what I'm doing, and so on. And then having that accident obviously showed me that life is precious and you only have what you have right now. And so in a lot of ways, it brought all my attention to the present. But in other ways, I think in hindsight, looking back, I think I ended up carrying a huge weight. Kind of like, well, if I didn't die and should have died, I was saved for something. What is it?
Hmm.
And that pressure to be like, I got to do something meaningful created a pretty strong criticism that I really regret in my life. And doing trades felt like, oh, I can't be in construction. That's not good enough. I have to do something with my life worth my life being saved for. And it created I think a anxiety in me and an unwillingness to just appreciate the simple beauty of work. And it drove me to always be pursuing something more meaningful. And, when we were working together and doing all the different work that I've done in my life, I'm thankful for all of it. But there has been a strong push in my life to try and make my life do something meaningful. And I think that has at times stolen from me the ability to appreciate just the simple value of working. Almost like, I would never have said this, but I think subconsciously swinging a hammer or doing a trade isn't really making a difference in the world. And feeling like I need to go do some grand thing. But now kind of spending 43 years and having done so many different things and meeting so many different people, the things I value the most in my life are just the simple connections with people that I've had. And all the different jobs I've had. The thing that makes the job so meaningful is how you treat people and how you perceive people, and learning to actually see that. Take Akribis, for example. You guys have alluded to it a couple of times, but the simple reality that your business has the capacity and opportunity to give people space to build a life. And especially in the economy that we're surrounded by, that's really rare, that a business can exist within a really struggling economy and not be dependent on Summerland getting its act together and the economy growing. You can ship products around the world. We can have a dozen people working here that all can slowly build a life, feed their kids, help their kids go off to university, and be able to have tradesmen come through the door, listen to their stories, create something that helps them do their work, that helps them feed their family. Like the meaningfulness and the value of what we do, to be able to see it for what it is, rather than just, oh, I work in a little storefront and I work behind a till and sell people tool belts. That's dumb. I need to go and, move to an island and help foster kids. I did that. That is no more meaningful than being here and selling tool belts to people, because the ability to show people that they're valuable, that they have worth as a person, and just genuinely care for them and love them, the people you work with, to be a part of their life and to express to them that they have value. To do that as a business generates more thriving in life in your families and then into your community. So Akribis has this incredible opportunity to provide space for community to grow. And when you see that, you can participate in doing your task with joy and freedom. And I think a lot of my life, I've spent so much energy being afraid I'm doing it wrong. This isn't good enough. This isn't the thing I'm meant to do. And it's kept me from doing so much more. And not that I needed to go do something else, but engaging more fully in the work that I have and appreciating the people I'm with. Because I look back at all the people I've worked with, and they are just incredible people. And the gift of being able to be with them in that time of life is just so good. So I think my personality in in working and us working together, there's been this evolution of me learning to process and let go of fear and learn to be content, whatever the circumstances are. And that's just been a long journey of me having to experience all these different things and see kind of in a long roundabout way, all these things you've been able to do are all meaningful. They're all awesome. You don't have to go off and live some crazy adventure, sail around the world, come back, write a book, someone makes a movie out of it, and you travel around doing conferences. Which somehow in my mind seems like that's a real worthwhile life. But to recognize that a simple life of loving the people you're with, there is no greater thing that you can do with your life than to love people. And that, I think, is real freedom. And I look back to whenever we had tension in work, or that fear of making a mistake, that fear of somebody flying off the handle, throwing a hammer and getting mad at you, and you feeling like your worth is tied up in those things, to recognize that it isn't. And you're free to just enjoy. And who doesn't want to be around somebody who's just genuinely enjoying? Like, I can think of guys I've worked with in the past that, like, on crews that carried that. And I loved it. It didn't even matter the job. I loved working with them, and they made the work better. And I think of the guys that came into our shop the other day, group of 4 friends that came in here. They all do drywall, and they were just the most amazing guys. Only one spoke English, and they were getting belts, and they do drywall. And I said to Luke after, I'm like, I could do drywall with those, and I've hated doing drywall. But I could do drywall with those guys because there's a sense of joy and freedom. And when I was doing roofing is like miserable. I don't want to do roofing. But I worked with a guy who was so funny and engaging and full of life that it made the work fulfilling. And when I did work building log houses for a little bit. And again, guy that I worked with, and sadly he was killed in a really tragic accident, but the experience of being around people that carry a sense of freedom. They're not trying to prove anything. They're not trying to achieve greatness. They're content and full of life and appreciating the simple things. There is like such a gravity to that, and it's such an attraction that it gives you permission, gives other people permission to be confident, to be courageous, to be courageous enough to enjoy the simplicity of life. And that to me has just been so powerful and something I've longed for my whole life, but have misunderstood. And I think in all of our time together as friends, I can see how those parts of me that have been insecure and fearful have hurt people I care about, has hurt my work, has hurt friendships and things like that. And the times where I've experienced people offering me that grace and that joy makes me go, oh man, now that I've kind of like been around the sun a few times, to go, oh, okay, that makes a big difference in people. You see the postman or the bus driver, like our friend Steve, who drives school bus, to drive school bus, genuinely loving every kid that comes on that bus and knowing that he makes a difference in their day and just loves it. Like those people, in my mind, and all the different things I've done in my life and all the different places I've been, I can picture those kind of people, and they change the world in their little space where they're at. And I find that so inspirational and exciting, and that you always have the capacity to do it, whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
You have that opportunity and that choice and that agency to do it. Yeah. But it takes a lot to do it, because especially for someone like me, who's typically more afraid and is like, I see all the bad things that are going to happen and I don't want them to happen. So I'm going to obsess about them so that they don't happen. It's very difficult to snap out of that, which in our time working together, that has been a big hurdle. And like you say, hey, you're a little bit more emotional. You're a little bit more passionate. And I know you mean that in a positive way, but I definitely am. And I think part of it is the ongoing wrestling in my life. This isn't the same at all, but to give some insight into it, the movie Saving Private Ryan, when they say to him after they finally find him, and all these people have died, make it worth it. Like live a life that makes it worth it. I think I've carried that really horrible weight of like, make your life worth God saving you out of this accident. Go do something meaningful. For some people, that's like a really good momentum, motivation. For me, it was just like, this is such a huge weight. Don't waste your potential. Don't. Oh. And so it's contributed to a lot of, I think, tensions in my life and just with my personality and so on.
But what a beautiful thing. Like you're, again, you know, like, I just want to come over and give you a little hug there. I almost had a couple of those. But like, I think you're just so spot on. And I think your ability to explain for a lot of people, like I think we would have this feeling and this thing inside there, but we don't know what it is. I think what you just explained, you have this ability to be able to put into words so many of maybe my thoughts or my emotions or what people have gone through, but also steer it in a really beautiful way that does create that sense of freedom and be like, yeah, what I am doing here is meaningful. And the people that I get to work with in this shop, the people that I get to bump into at the gas station, the people that I, you know, all those things, how valuable that is. You know, I mean, that's Dr. Dustin, Pastor Dustin coming out there just preaching it. Like,
people, like one of the things I'm so thankful for in my life is all these beautiful people that I've been able to enjoy. And like, that gets me emotional thinking about that. Like the gift of being able to appreciate and enjoy and get to know a person. Like there's only one of that person. And the uniqueness of an individual. There's never going to be that individual on the planet again. No one's lived Brad or Luke. No one. And no one ever will. And so when you meet a person, you're meeting an unrepeatable expression of something one of a kind. And you get this gift of being able to be with them in space and time. And the way they talk, the way their humor, their experiences and their story, it moves into yours and changes yours. And the world is a different place because Brad's been in it and Luke's been in it. Like that gift of being with people is just like, when you think about it, you're like, geez. And it makes you emotional and it wakes you up to be like, I'm having coffee with these amazing people. And everybody else is like, get over it. Sap. You're such a sap. But it's true. And I think when you can wake up to it, it's this incredible gift of being able to just delight and be so excited about your life. And sadly, our lives are so noisy and full of comparison and fear that we can't push past it sometimes to just wake up into your life and enjoy it. And I think I've spent a lot of days stuck in being anxious, panic attacks. I need to figure it out. I need to solve it. I need to control. And being able to let go is just this like incredible freedom. And yeah, looking back, I can see, I don't want to look back and be like, oh, I regret all these things, but it's almost like a compassion for my older self and a grace for him trying to figure it out. And meeting people, and we've talked about this before, like we know what we were like when we were 20 something. And you almost want to go back and smack that 20 something, but I actually wouldn't, because that 20 something would have been like, screw you, pal. Life is like this and you're wrong. I got it all figured out. But to go back to that guy and just, it's almost like I wouldn't even really say anything, just to be with him and enjoy that space and to just love him and give him that encouragement and enjoy him. Because I think when people genuinely enjoy each other, it gives them permission to be themselves and to step into thriving. Because who likes it when you're around someone that you always feel is critiquing you? And maybe all they're trying to do is push you into your potential. But it feels crushing. It feels heavy. It feels like you're always having to perform. And I think that's been part of our dynamic as friends, when your personality is more like driven to do things well and to do it really right. That perfectionism, and I know it's hard for you, you've shared that, because you see that, well, for starters, it's hard on you, but then to see that it's hard on people close to you is tragic and sad. But for in a friendship to recognize that that's not what you're doing, and to give each other that sense of freedom and appreciate it. For me to appreciate it, like I said, I wouldn't have built my house if you weren't immediately building a house in front of me across the street. To appreciate those gifts in each other and give each other the permission and the freedom to express them and genuinely enjoy people, I think that's the kind of people I know I want to be around.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of wonderful things said there. I think that's a great place to wrap up.
Yeah, when's the book coming out?
No kidding. I feel so encouraged.
Everybody needs a little Dustin, that type of personality. And I think that's one of the things that does make our, it's such a beautiful thing. You have these different personalities and
Did you think the mustache helped at all? Or did it detract?
I'm really happy that it made me forget about it. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Thanks for watching and listening, and we'll see you again next time.